All right, hello everyone. Hello. Just coffee here. So we have in this week's Torah reading, which is Shoftim, we have 38 commandments. Huh? 38 commandments. 11 of them are positive, and 27 of them are prohibitions. And yesterday we talked a little bit about some of the commandments. For instance, to appoint judges. That's the name of the whole Torah portion. And then we threw in a commandment over there about not planting a tree in the holy temple. Lo sateh asherah, lo sateh asherah. Can't plant a tree or to make some sort of a statue in the holy temple. Obelisk. Next commandment. No, we skipped. We're going to skip a little bit here, but I want to tell you what you missed. You're not allowed to sacrifice an animal in the temple. You're not allowed to sacrifice an animal anywhere else except for the temple. And when you do sacrifice the animal, it has to be according to up to standards. It can't have any blemishes in it. And the Torah says what the blemishes are, right? If it's ugly, that's not one of the blemishes. If its leg is broken or something like that, it doesn't have to be treif either. How do you say unedible? It just the Torah lists what the things are that disqualify a sacrifice. Next, we have a commandment that you have to listen to what the court says. Kol asher yerucha. Positive command, you have to listen. Negative commandment, don't disobey the court. Then we have a commandment over here that you have to appoint yourself a king. We're gonna skip that today. Maybe we'll go back to it. Anyway, you have to. It's a positive commandment that when all the Jews come to the land of Israel, you have to appoint a king, and you cannot. That's a positive commandment. The negative commandment is don't appoint a king that's not a Jew. If his mother wasn't Jewish, or if he's a convert or something, you cannot appoint him. It's a law. Why? That's what God decided. You can't do it. Okay. Next, 3 commandments over here. The king should not have too many horses. The king should not have too many wives. The king should not have too much money. And it gives the qualifications what it means too much. Next, the king has to write for himself a Sefer Torah. In addition to the Sefer Torah that he receives from his forefathers, he has to write himself a Sefer Torah. Next commandment. We're getting close to where we're learning today. It's forbidden to live permanently in Egypt. Like it says, Lo sosifu l'shuv b'derech haze'ot, forbidden to live in Egypt. Okay. And generally speaking, it's forbidden to go outside of Israel unless it is to get married or to make a livelihood, or if you feel the place is going to make you sin, you can leave. But generally, you're not supposed to go. Also, it's forbidden really to leave Babel and go to Babylon and go to these other places also. All right. In any case, a person is supposed to better to live in Israel than outside of Israel, even though we see the great Maimonides and Nachmanides and Rashi. They did not live in Israel, but that doesn't mean that it's a mitzvah. They had their reasons, but you have to find some reason. You can't just because you want to. Negative commandment: the Levites don't get a portion of the land like all the other tribes. Everybody has to provide for them their needs, etc., because they can't do farming, things like that. They're working in the temple. Positive commandment. You have to, if you sacrifice an animal in the holy temple, you have to give a big portion to the Kohen, to the priest, namely a leg and the jaw and part of the stomach. Explains what that is. Next commandment, you have to take Truma Gedola. Truma Gedola means you have to take 1/50th, 1/40th, anyway, of your food and give it, your produce, and give it to the Kohen. Next commandment, the positive commandment, you have to give to the Kohen the first shearings of your flock. Next, there's another, this is a commandment for the Kohen. The Kohanim have to have a certain number of them for all the holidays. They have to be there. And you have to provide for the Kohen and the Levites because they have to, they're dependent on you for charity. Okay, now we're up to where we are. Ready? Let's go. Now Moses is talking to the Jewish people, right? This is before they go into the land of Israel. And he's saying to the Jews, okay, you're going to go to the land of Israel that God gave to you. Good. Lo tilmad lasot katoevot hagoyim elu. Don't learn to do the, how to say, abominations of the non-Jews that are there. Okay, what are the non-abominations? There's all sorts of abominations. We'll see later on. There's all sorts of sexual abominations that you're not supposed to do. And most of those are forbidden also for the non-Jews, right? To have relations with a man, to have relations with somebody else's wife, etc., with your children. Then there's also abominations that the non-Jews do, which is idolatry. They worship idols. They bow down to all sorts of crazy things with passing their children from between fire. But this abomination is a different type of abomination. This is trying to figure out the future by means of sorcery, nefarious ways, whatever you want to call it. Not proper ways to tell the future. Now, telling the future, what's the problem with telling the future? I mean, people, if you can tell the future, so why not? Well, I know it makes you more secure. What's wrong? We'll see that a Jew is allowed to try to find the future also. He's allowed to, but it has to be in a permissible way. Here we go. Ready? When you come to the land that God gave you, don't learn to do like the abominations of the non-Jews that are before you, Rashi. But you can learn to understand, you can learn the ways of the non-Jews in order to understand and to decide laws. In other words, lahavin, to understand what they're doing, how tremendously, how do you say, perverted they are. And then you can tell your children, don't do this and this. That this is what the non-Jews do. You can't do that. So your son comes home and says, wow, this is really great. There's a kid in my neighborhood that he has a crystal ball and he can tell everything that's going to be. He said, oh yeah, what did he say? He said, well, I'm going to come home and you're going to be really mad when I'm telling you. He says, well, on that he was right. Because you're not supposed to look in crystal balls. It's forbidden to know the future. We're going to see how you can tell a false prophet from a real prophet. Here he says, it says here, don't ask for an ov. We're going to see what this ov and yidoni and these things are, what the non-Jews do. We are supposed to ask the king, he asks in the Urim and the Tumim. He does know there's the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol that used to shine up and tell the future. So let's see what the difference between good future telling and bad future telling. And what are you not supposed to do? Ma'avir bano obito laish. Passing your son or daughter over fire. This is idolatry. This is avodas a molech. You make a big fire and you pass the children between them. I really tell you the truth. I don't understand what is such a big deal about this particular idolatry, why this particular idolatry is not good. But it's mentioned so many times in the Torah. Don't worship the Molech. Don't pass your children between the fire. Anyway, we'll find out somewhat why this particular one is so. I mean, all of the idolatry is abomination to God. Why this one? Now, they didn't burn their children. They didn't burn their children up. According to some opinions, they did. They would take one son and burn him up for the, benefit of mankind. Who knows what? The rest of the family. But no, according to Rashi, they didn't do that. They just made two big fires and they just passed. They gave the child to the priests or whatever they were, and the priests just passed them between these two fires. But then, okay, here we go. Kosem ksamim. What's a kosem? Here, let's see the pasuk. Kosem ksamim meonen menachesh umchashev. Here's 4 different types of sorcery, future telling. Kosem, ma'onin, menachesh, mechashev. What are these? Kosem, what is a kosem? Ha'ochas is maklo. He holds onto some sort of a staff that he has, a pole. Omer, he says, im elech, im lo elech. Should I go or should I not go? B'kein Omar, imi be'etzo yishal, umaklo yagidlo. So it says also in Hosea, ask me questions, right? The sorcerers say, ask me a question, and my staff will give you the answer. Ma'onin, Rabbi Akiva says, these are notnim onot. She'omrim ona polonit yafel etchil. Don't go on Tuesday, go on Wednesday. Sometimes you have in the newspapers. I remember they used to have these horoscope. And it is, don't go on Tuesday to the marketplace, go on Wednesday. This is a good date to start. I start when the sun is, in the middle of the sky. Some people say, no, these are ochazei enayim. These are people that do all sorts of magical tricks, but they don't say that they're just optical illusions. They say they're really doing something. Incidentally, if someone stands up, very, very common, that they bring for children, religious children, Jewish children, they bring like a person who pulls a rabbit out of the hat or whatever, but beforehand he explains, says, these tricks I'm going to do, I'm not going to explain to you how I do it, but I want you to know it's just, how do you say, optical illusion. I'm not really doing anything, that's okay. Wow, how did you do that? So I'm sorry, it's a secret, but I want you to know it's a thing trick that I do with my hands, and then I'm not really making a rabbit, and I'm not really making a boy appear on the top of the rope or whatever. If he does actually make it happen, that's really bad. Menachesh, what's a menachesh? It said he gives signs. Your bread fell from your mouth when you were eating. A deer went in front of your way. Your hand fell from you, right? A black cat crossed your path. Bad sign. That's called menachesh, and it's forbidden. Now, the fact of the matter is that these things work. They do not work 100%. They do not work, but they work more than 50%. In other words, they work sufficiently that people actually go for them. Like these horoscopes in the paper, right? They have to work. If they didn't work, nobody would read them. So obviously they must work. Even though they do work, nevertheless, it's forbidden. And one of the reasons is that true, they work, 50%, 80%, 90% of the time, but it makes you not trust in God. It makes you think that these things really work, and the other 10% also can really lead you astray sometimes. I mean, it goes without saying, there's people that get into these things, seances and stuff, and that's asking the dead. We'll talk about that, and that stuff can really be dangerous. I know people that did seances. I, for some reason, always sort of kept. I was once or twice at those things before I was religious. And it was a little bit too freaky for me. I didn't really like the idea of putting myself into under the control of some sort of power that I didn't really know where this was coming from. It seemed that it had its own sort of how do you say, intentions, this power, whatever it is, and I don't know where it could lead to. And I know people that were actually haunted by these. I know that they were. I mean, they're haunted. They heard voices and they heard things. Okay, maybe you can say it was schizophrenia, but the fact is they heard voices and they came after. They saw things, right? And that was because they did these seances and stuff like that. Okay, what is a ma'onen? A ma'onen, right? That's what we said. Menachesh. We said that. We said all these. Yeah. Another one is chover, asking an ov, v'yidoni, or dorish at the mason, or requesting from the dead that they come to speak to you. Now, this, by the way, is not, some people really sort of misunderstand this. And, you can't blame them because that's what it seems. But the fact is, this is not referring to praying at graves of tzaddikim, because the tzaddikim don't really die. I know it sounds a little bit sort of like an excuse, but the fact it's not. Dead, and we see that in the Chumash, that Kalev, when the 12 spies went to spy out the land of Israel, so Kalev, he went to Hebron to pray at the graves of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And if you look in the Zohar and other books, it says that when we sound the shofar, that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they all are become, representatives for us. And they ask God they intercede for us, for God. So these people going to graves of tzaddikim, the Arizal, the Rabbi Yoshua Bar Yochai, to go there, this is not at all dead, because they're not dead, right? These people are just on a different plane of reality that we are not privy to, but that they are. So it's very common by the Hasidic rabbis that their father or their teacher will come and speak to them and give them Torah ideas, and it's like, okay, so let's go. Chover. What does he do? He gathers together all sorts of snakes or scorpions and other animals, to one place, and somehow or other from that he gets an arousal from the spiritual arousal, and he starts saying all sorts of future things. Shoel ov, to ask an ov. What's ov? This is some sort of a sorcery that his name is pitom. Umedaber Meshicho, somehow or other, he does some sort of incantations, and a voice comes out from his armpit. And similar to the same thing, he can raise up the dead, that all of a sudden the dead person talks from this person's armpit. Right? You want to talk to Uncle Joe? Yeah, Uncle Joe, where did you put the money? Where did you put the money? All of a sudden it comes out from his armpit. The money is under the table. This you're not allowed to do. What's a yidoni? He puts a bone in his mouth, and the animal, from an animal which is called a yadua. And then the bone starts to speak by means of some sort of witchcraft or sorcery or whatever it is. Necromancy. Dorish is the mason, that's the necromancy. Kagona male bizichrono bizachruto benishal begolgolet. For instance, he asked some people, they ask the a skull, huh? Alas, poor Yorick, a fellow of infinite jest, he holds a skull in front of him, and he talks to the skull, and the skull talks back to him. Okay, why not do these things? Come on, what's so bad about it? I mean, he's not worshiping these things. He's just doing tricks in order to know what the future is. What's so bad about knowing the future? And we'll see, like I said before, that it's okay for Jews to know the future. That's why God's going to send us prophets, and we have but these things, to'avas Hashem kolos eilim. These are disgusting to God. Anyone who does these things, because these disgusting things, Hashem Elokecha morish otam mifanecha. God will drive them, the non-Jews. He drove the non-Jews out before you. Ose kol elo, no. It doesn't say if you do all of these. If you do these, even if you do one of them. So it's disgusting to God. Okay, all these things about these toivas, these things that are disgusting, basically what it is connecting to an impure force. Connecting. That's the idea of idolatry. It's called a toiva to God. Why is that a toiva? Because you're connecting to something other than your creator. All these sexual forbidden things, having relations with animals or homosexuality things, that's called a to'eva, because you're connecting to something that God forbids you to. Right? In this case, it doesn't have any fruit. You can't have any children. But that's a side reason. The main reason is because God. And the same thing here. It's okay to find about the future, but you have to do it in a way that God permits. You must be wholesome with God, your God. Here's a very interesting one. Look at this. This is beautiful. Here, the Orach Chaim is Rabbi Chaim ben Atar. You have to be tamim tiyem Hashem Elokechem. Tamim means a lot of things. Tamim means wholesome. It means simple. It means complete. Tamim. Humble. Tamim tiyem Hashem Elokechem. You must be humble or wholesome with God. Don't try to outguess God. What does it mean? Because it says afterwards that you're not allowed to do any of these, right, over these sorceries and witchcraft. Labal yishal ba'ov, you shouldn't ask in an ov with these things tucked from your armpits or skulls or whatever. Therefore, it says you have to be complete. What does it mean? The reason for all these things that you want to know what's in the future, in order that you can fix up whatever you're lacking as much as you can, right? You need money, so I want to know which horse to bet on, which number to play on the numbers racket, whatever they have. The lottery, lottery. So why not find out the future? What's wrong with that? It says, because what do you want to do? You want to fix up something that's lacking by you. If you will be wholesome by God, then you won't really lack anything. And whatever happens to be for bad won't occur to you. How do we know something like that? Maybe God has decided that bad things should happen to me. God forbid. What does it mean if I'm wholesome and I believe in God, it won't happen? Take an example from Abraham. In the beginning, Abraham, he went, with God, with wholesomeness. Whatever God told him to do, he did. He didn't think about what the results are going to be. But in the beginning, it said that his constellation, his zodiac, the zodiac chart of all the stars showed Shelo Yalid, that he couldn't have any children. But because Abraham trusted in God, it said God, he took him outside, but he took him. So God took him above the stars. Nefach, all of a sudden his future, his destiny, changed. The Yolid, and he gave birth to children. So you can, by means of being simple with God, like the saying goes, think good and it will be good. That's what it means. Tamim tiyem Hashem Elokechem. This word, Tamim tiyem Hashem Elokechem, can go what's here and go for the back. Tamim tiyeh, the simple meaning is you should be wholesome with God. Another meaning is tamim tiyeh, if you will be wholesome. Tamim, if you will be wholesome, then tiyeh Hashem Elokechem, then you will be with God. That's what it says. This goes from what's above and what's below. Tamim tiyeh, im tiyeh Hashem, or al derech zeh tamim tiyeh. So it says, Tamim tiyeh, you should be complete with God. Tamim goes together with tiyeh, you should be. Or Tamim, you should be complete. And if you do that, then tiyeh Hashem Elokechem, you will be with your God. Kol hagoyim ha'elu, all of these non-Jews that are in front of you, they go to the ma'onanim ulamakosimim, to all these sorcerers and witches and fortune tellers. Loken natan lecha Hashem elokecha, but God didn't give it to you, right? God said, don't listen to these people. But what God put His Shekhinah, His inspiration, godly inspiration, on the prophets. Now, all these other people, these witches and sorcerers and crystal gazers and astrologers, they also have inspiration, but it's not from God. Their inspiration is from some spiritual powers that they connect to. But God Himself, and a lot of times it can be very successful, right? They say that Hitler, may his name be blotted out forever, that he had a whole staff of like 100, I don't know, 200 astrologers that would tell him exactly what to do. And I guess they really helped him in the beginning. So it says, what about us? Why we can't know the future? We just have to just sort of, whatever case sarah, whatever happens, that's good. It says, no, Navi mikir b'cha b'achecha chamoni. Messages that are important to you, you will receive for the future from a prophet of God. Kamosh ani, it says, a prophet within you. What does it mean? Moses said, just like I am within you, not a prophet like me. It says that there's never going to be another prophet like Moses. Every word that Moses said was exactly what God said. The other prophets, they didn't say exactly what God wanted. Exactly. They gave over exactly the message that God wanted, but it was in their own language. So, but there'll be a prophet among you just like me, a person just like me. And also from every prophet to every prophet, there are going to be prophets that are going to tell you what to do, and you have to listen to them. Elav tishmon. You have to listen to them. Anything that you want to ask from God, I'm sorry, kachol, just like you asked from God, the Chorev on Mount Sinai. What happened on Mount Sinai? God wanted all of you to be prophets. He wanted all the Jewish people to be at the level of Moses. But the Jewish people couldn't take it. And when they got the first revelations of Mount Sinai, God speaking the first two commandments. So it says, what happened? You asked me. You asked from God. Moses is saying this. On Chorev, Chorev means Mount Sinai. On the day when all you were gathered together, and you said, Lo osif lishmoa et kol Hashem. God said the first two commandments, and you Jewish people said, we can't take it anymore. We can't listen to God, our God. At the Eish Gadol, this big fire, Lo erev lo amut. I can't take it. If so, I'm going to die. What does it mean? That's what the Or HaChaim said. Ulai shebo lomar shehem. Maybe this is coming to say that you yourself caused that you need prophets, and you need these prophets because you were afraid from the difficulties that would result from being a prophet. Prophets had life very difficult for them. Prophets, they always had to do exactly what God said, and the people did not want to hear what they had to say. So therefore, because if you on Mount Sinai you would have just agreed to hear all the 10 commandments, but you didn't. You only heard the first two. And those first two you also didn't do. They worshiped the golden calf. So therefore, I'm giving you a prophet, and you have to listen to him. That's what the whole... Vayomer Hashem Elai, and when you Jewish people, when you said, we can't take it, please appoint someone else. So God said to me, good, it's good what they said. I am going to make a prophet, Navi Akim Lahem, I will make a prophet, Mikirav Achechem, from one of the Jews, Kamocha, just like you, Moses. In every generation there's going to be at least one person, he's going to be a prophet. The Dibra Elokim, it called Etzavenu, and he will say, Alehem, sorry, the Dibra, and he will say whatever I command. The Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, points out that there is no time limit on this. that every generation has to have someone who's a prophet. And even though official prophecy, it says it stopped with Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi in the beginning of the first temple, the second temple. That was the official ones that are written down. But every generation, there were prophets. There were people that were prophecy. It says that there was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, way after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And the Baal Shem Tov, these people were prophets. We saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe was a prophet. We saw it. He said that the 6-day war was going to end in just a few days. Everyone was saying it's going to be a catastrophe. And the Rebbe said, don't worry about it, just a couple of days, it's going to be finished. You shouldn't even leave Israel. Right? No one agreed with him, and he was the only one that was right. There are many, many examples. So the Rebbe, the God is saying, I am giving a prophet, I'll make a prophet every generation, you should listen to him. And a person that does not listen to these words of the prophet, that the prophet is speaking in my name, I will, how do you say, I'll take it up with him. God said, he'll have to account to me. But on the other hand, so any person that stands up and says, I am a prophet of the Lord, hear what the Lord said, and he really is not a prophet of the Lord at all. Right? Any faker can come up, and there's no lack of fakers in Judaism. Right? No lack of fakers in Judaism. People that think that they're leaders and they know what they're talking about. But a Navi, Asher Yazid, that's the politicians in general, I like that. But a prophet that speaks, that purposely says things in my name, which I did not command to say, Bashir the Baron, he says, especially if he says in the name of another God, then he's punishable by death. And so it was, there was a story over here. Okay, well, it says, there's different things. Sometimes a prophet can receive a prophecy and refuses to prophesy, like with Jonah. He has a prophecy. That's also a punishment of death, but it's not death from the hands of court. Here, let's have a look and see Rashi. If I didn't command him to say a prophecy, but I commanded his friend to say, I show you the bear. Some people ask, how could Aaron, before Matan Torah, so Moses, before the Torah was given, so Moses had a speech impediment. So when he went into Paro, God told Moses what to say, and Moses told Aaron, and Aaron gave over God's word to Paro. Well, you can't do that. A prophet has to give over what God told him. You can't give it over to someone else. This is Reb Sadia Gaon says. How could Aaron speak? He didn't hear directly from God. So it says, in the Torah, it says that Moses was God. Ata tiyeh Elokim leparo, you will be God. God says to Moses, and Aaron will be your prophet. So when Moses spoke, just like the whole book of Deuteronomy, Moses is speaking, and Moses says, if you do my commandments, I will give. So this, of course, is an amazing mystery, but that's the idea of Moses. A prophet is a person that's totally like a vessel for godliness. On the other hand, there were a lot of fake prophets. There were prophets, the real prophets were outnumbered 100 to 1, who knows, probably more. It says, if there's a prophet that did not hear from God, and he says that he did hear from God, then his punishment is God. It says Rashi, even if that false prophet says proper things, and he says what's forbidden is forbidden, and what's permissible is permissible. But nevertheless, if he says, I am receiving this law directly from God, then the punishment is death. Of course, he has to be taken to court. He has to have warning. He has to have witnesses. And his death is chenek. He is choked to death. There's 3 types of false prophet that the punishment is death by the court. A prophet that prophesies what he didn't hear from God. A prophet that prophesies things that nobody heard from God. I'm sorry, that nobody heard from God. Second one is that he didn't hear, but his friend did hear. And someone who prophesies in the name of idolatry. In the name of idolatry. Those 3 are punishable by death. But a person that he refuses to prophesy. He gets a prophecy, he refuses to say it. Or Another one, a person who hears the words of the prophet, but he transgresses those words. And third, a prophet that prophesizes and he goes against his own prophecy. All the punishment is also death, but that's from heaven. God takes care of it. God, if a person says in your heart, okay, so how am I going to know who's the real prophet and who's not the real prophet, right? So stands up Isaiah and says, this is the word of the Lord. Stands up Shmerel the prophet, and he says, here you're going to see there was a prophet called, what's his name? Yirmiyah, was it? Here. Hananiah. Hananiah ben Ozer. Hananiah ben Ozer was a false prophet. In the days of Jeremiah, Jeremiah led a terribly difficult life. He prophesied from the beginning to the end. The Jewish people should just recant, or God's going to destroy the temple. And they didn't recant. God did destroy the temple. But there was also a lot of false prophets that drove the people crazy. And they were really the ones at fault. And the prophet, he stood up. And now Isaiah was saying, listen, everybody, you're going to go into Babylon. It's going to be an exile. Get ready. Don't worry about it. You'll be there for a long time. But you're going to come back. You're going to come back, right? If the people would have listened, it could be that the temple wouldn't have been destroyed. It would have just been left there and they would have gone. Stood up the prophet Hananiah ben Azur, and he said, the vessels of the house are in Babylon and they will return quickly. And Jeremiah was standing and screaming and saying, no, it's not so. Anyway, the prophecy of this Hananiah did not come to be. And so they knew that he was a false prophet. Now, the way it goes is like this, that if a prophet says something bad is going to happen, and it doesn't happen, it could be that the Jewish people listened to his prophecy and they repented, and therefore they averted the decree. But if a prophet says something good is going to happen, then it always happens. If it doesn't happen, there was only one exception. If a prophet prophesizes something is going to happen, a good thing, and it doesn't happen, that's a sign that he's a bad prophet. And here it is. The prophet said, don't worry, you'll go to exile for a couple of days, you're going to come back. And then, so they knew he was a false prophet. His punishment was death. If a prophet says, so here it is, if a prophet speaks in the name of God, but he never received the word of God, so then, Zadon de Bro, therefore he is speaking purposely against God. Lo tagor, you must kill him. Don't be afraid of him. Prophecy, false prophet, has to be killed. This does not apply today. Don't try it at home. Don't say because your rabbi told you to do X and it didn't work, so therefore he's a false prophet. And there's no death penalty anymore. There hasn't been for the last over 2,000 years death penalty in Judaism. And for sure, even when it was, there had to be proper witnesses and there had to be proper judges and etc. But nevertheless, we know that God is definitely very displeased with false prophets. And we should know that there have to be real prophets. And in our generation, the Rebbe said that he's one. We're going to learn that. Come to our class in Devar Malchut, and you'll see that he said he's definitely a prophet. You can check it out, all the things that he said. And the previous Rebbe was also a prophet. And so that God did not abandon us without prophets. So we have no reason. I wanted to say over here, where is this over here? I forgot where this was. Any case, he asks over here, where is this? I forgot where it is. All right, I'll just say it. I forgot who said it. By Shmuel. There's the famous story with Samuel the prophet. And Samuel the prophet, King Saul. So King Saul, he was being attacked by the police team. And he would always go to Shmuel, the prophet Samuel, and get advice. But Samuel died. And King Saul, even though that Samuel told him that you're going to lose the kingship, but he was thinking about the Jewish people. He wanted to know what to do. Should he attack? Should he not attack? So he didn't know what to do. So he went to a witch. Says, what is it? A machshefa of Endor. And he brought up Shmuel, from the dead. Brought him up from the dead. So he said, what'd you bring me up from the dead for? And so he said, well, I did it because I want to know what to do. I want to save the Jewish people. I want to save the Jewish people. So he said to him, listen, you want to come and ask my advice. Okay, but you brought me up by witchcraft. If you want to, you could have gone to my grave and you could have prayed. And if you would have gotten an answer, you will get an answer. That's okay. But to go to a witch and bring me up, no way. You can't do it. And the fact of the matter is you're going to get killed tomorrow and your sons will get killed, and so it was. The question, though, still remains, how could he have gone to a witch? What was he thinking? What was King Saul thinking? That he went to a witch? How did he think it was going to come out good? So he says, very simple. And when is it forbidden to go to a necromancer and to all these other things? When? Says, if there is a prophet in Israel. But there was no prophet. King Samuel, Shmuel had already died. So because there was no prophet in Israel, so he thought the only time where it's forbidden to go to see a witch or these other fortune tellers, which essentially there's no essential bad thing in it. You're not worshiping an idol or something. You just want to know the future. The only time it's future that he thought, the only time it's forbidden to go is if there's no prophet in Israel. He made a mistake. And in fact, there was no prophet in Israel. There was, but nevertheless, he got punished for it. Okay, that is. Let's do a little bit of the Pirkei Avot. Can we do it? Yes.